Daniel Carter shoved open the door to his third-floor apartment in Renton at 10:45 on a Thursday night, every vertebra in his spine screaming for mercy. 17 hours on his feet replacing ductwork in the North Tower of Apex Technologies, the fourth consecutive double shift this
We need to
week,
talk about this
and
now.
his body
I
felt
know,
like
but
it belonged
maybe not
to a
here.
man twice his age. The blue coveralls reeked of machine oil and sweat, knees blackened from crawling through ventilation shafts barely wide enough for his shoulders. His hands still buzzed from gripping power tools all day, that phantom vibration that would keep him awake even when exhaustion dragged him under. Lily was sleeping at his sister Beth's place until morning, which meant the apartment should have been dark and silent as a tomb. Daniel had been looking forward to collapsing on the couch without having to pretend he had energy left for bedtime stories or homework help. The guilt of that relief sat heavy in his chest, but exhaustion had a way of drowning out everything else. Water ran in the kitchen, dishes clinked against porcelain. Footsteps moved across tile he had installed himself 2 years ago when the landlord refused to fix cracked linoleum. Every combat instinct from 12 years in the Navy snapped to attention. Someone was inside his home. Daniel's pulse kicked into overdrive, adrenaline burning through the fatigue like fire through paper. He moved down the hallway without breathing, each step deliberate despite the weight of his work boots. His hand closed around the umbrella near the coat rack. Not much of a weapon against an intruder with a gun or knife, but better than facing someone empty-handed. Kitchen light spilled into the darkened living room, casting long shadows that shifted with movement. A woman stood at his sink, back turned, dark hair falling loose past her shoulders, white blouse that probably cost more than his monthly rent. A pair of expensive heels lay discarded beside the counter, as if she had been here long enough to get comfortable in his space. The woman turned, and Daniel's entire body locked up. The umbrella slipped from fingers that had forgotten how to grip. Elena Morrison, CEO of Apex Technologies. The woman employees whispered about in break rooms, calling her the Ice Queen for the way she could terminate someone without a flicker of emotion crossing her face. Daniel had only ever seen her from a distance during quarterly all-hands meetings, standing at podiums in suits that cost thousands of dollars, her voice crisp and emotionless as she discussed profit margins and strategic initiatives that meant nothing to the people actually keeping the machinery running. Standing in his kitchen, at his sink, in his apartment, the absurdity of it punched through his exhaustion like a sledgehammer. His voice came out harder than he intended, anger replacing shock as his brain tried to process what his eyes were showing him. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" Elena set down the plate she had been washing with the kind of care someone might use handling a museum artifact. Her face remained composed, professional, the same mask she probably wore in board meetings when deciding which departments to downsize. But her eyes told a different story. Not surprise, not embarrassment. Something that looked uncomfortably like regret mixed with determination. "Mr. Carter, I know you weren't expecting me." The formality of it struck him as almost absurd given the circumstances. "I came here to tell you the truth about what's been happening to you at Apex Technologies." Her voice wavered on the word truth, the first crack in that professional veneer Daniel had ever witnessed. He watched her hands grip the edge of his sink, knuckles whitening with the pressure. "And Daniel, what I'm about to tell you will break your heart." A bitter laugh escaped him before he could stop it. No humor in the sound, just the noise of a man who had been pushed too far and was too tired to care about consequences anymore. "You're the CEO of a company worth hundreds of millions. You don't make house calls to maintenance workers at 11 at night. So what is this really? Some kind of publicity stunt? Undercover boss episode I didn't sign up for?" Elena turned to face him fully, and for the first time, Daniel really looked at her as a person rather than a distant authority figure. Dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, strands of hair that had escaped from what had probably been a tight bun hours ago, a slight tremor in her hands as she brushed them against her slacks, betraying nerves the rest of her body language tried to conceal. She moved to his kitchen table, the cheap one he had bought at a yard sale 3 years ago, and sat down with shoulders sagging in a way Daniel had never seen from the Ice Queen. A gesture of surrender, of exhaustion, of something that looked dangerously close to defeat. "Please sit down." "I'd rather stand." The formality felt important, a way to maintain distance, to remember she was not a person in his kitchen, but the embodiment of a system that had been grinding him down for 2 years. Silence stretched between them, heavy as wet concrete. Elena's composure fractured just slightly, hairline cracks spreading across that professional mask. "You're right. I've been blind. Willfully blind." She pulled out the chair across from where he stood and lowered herself into it like her legs would not hold her anymore. "Daniel, do you know why you work 17-hour days while other technicians work 8? The shift in tone caught him off guard, from apology to interrogation in a heartbeat. Daniel's jaw tightened. Because Richard Holloway, his direct supervisor, kept telling him they were short-staffed. Because the workload never decreased, no matter how many hours he put in. Because he was not good enough, not fast enough, could not keep up with what everyone else seemed to manage easily. We're short-staffed. Everyone knows that. You're not short-staffed. Elena pulled papers from a leather bag Daniel had not noticed sitting beside the table. Spreadsheets, payroll documents, employee records spread across the surface of his cheap yard sale table like evidence at a crime scene. Marcus Webb, employee ID 4782, HVAC contractor, hired 20 months ago, salary $52,000 annually. Bank deposits to Wells Fargo account ending in 8291. She slid the first document toward him. Daniel moved closer despite himself, his eyes scanning names and numbers that did not make sense at first. A contractor working remotely from Portland. Someone he had never met, never talked to on the phone, never seen a single work order from. Rebecca Foster, employee ID 4791, electrical contractor, hired 18 months ago, salary $48,000 annually. Bank deposits to Chase account ending in 4405. Another document, another name Daniel had never heard mentioned in any team meeting or work order. Someone supposedly handling electrical work while Daniel spent weekends rewiring systems alone. James Porter, employee ID 4805, systems contractor, hired 22 months ago, salary $51,000 annually. Bank deposits to Bank of America account ending in 7732. Elena's voice had gone flat, clinical, like she was reading a coroner's report. Daniel stared at the 3 names, the 3 salaries, the 3 sets of bank deposits that all shared one common detail buried in the fine print of each document. Account holder, Garrett Holloway. These 3 people don't exist. Elena's words landed like physical blows. Garrett Holloway has been reporting phantom contractors to corporate, collecting their salaries and making you cover the workload of 4 people. Daniel felt his legs go weak. He sank into the chair without deciding to, his hands reaching for the papers like they might reveal this was all some terrible mistake, some misunderstanding that would make sense if he just looked at the numbers differently. But the numbers did not lie. $151,000 per year times 2 years. $302,000. Garrett had been stealing from the company, from him, For 2 years. 2 years of wondering why he was always exhausted, why he could not keep up, why every shift felt like drowning. 2 years of missing Lily's school plays because he was replacing air handlers that should have been Marcus Webb's job. Missing parent-teacher conferences because he was rewiring electrical systems that should have been Rebecca Foster's responsibility. Missing bedtime stories because he was troubleshooting HVAC controls that should have been James Porter's problem. But Marcus and Rebecca and James did not exist, had never existed, were just names on paper funneling money into Garrett Holloway's bank accounts while Daniel destroyed his body trying to do the impossible. That's not all. Elena's voice pulled him back from whatever dark place his mind was spiraling toward. She slid 2 more folders across the table, one red and one blue, both containing papers Daniel recognized immediately. His performance reviews. The ones that had kept him from getting promoted for 2 years. The ones he had memorized, had read late at night when Lily was asleep, trying to figure out what he was doing wrong. Elena opened the red folder first, and Daniel did not need to look at the pages to know what they said. Official Performance Review, Marcus Reynolds. Error rate 12%. Productivity 78% of standard. Overall assessment meets requirements but needs improvement. Recommendation not suitable for promotion at this time. The words were knives. Had been knives for 2 years, cutting into him every time he read them. Proof that he was not good enough, would never be good enough. That he was failing Lily by being mediocre at the one thing that was supposed to provide for her. Elena closed the red folder and opened the blue one. Her voice changed, becoming sharper, angrier, as if the numbers on this page offended her personally. Actual performance data, Daniel Carter. Error rate 0.4%. Highest performing technician in company history. Productivity 310% of standard. Customer satisfaction 4.9 out of 5.0. Comparative ranking exceeds all 15 key performance indicators. Daniel stared at the numbers, read them again. They could not make sense, could not be real. Because if these numbers were accurate, if this data was true, then he was not mediocre, not failing, not barely scraping by. He was exceptional. The word caught in his throat, too foreign to speak aloud. 12 years in the Navy, 6 years since his honorable discharge, 2 years breaking his back for Garrett Holloway while being told he was not good enough. And all of it had been a lie. Why? His voice broke on the single syllable. 2 years of self-doubt crystallizing into one question that demanded an answer. Why would he do this? Elena leaned forward, and something in her expression shifted from professional to personal. From CEO to human being witnessing an injustice she had failed to prevent. Because you're good at your job, Daniel. Too good. If corporate leadership saw your real performance numbers, you'd be promoted immediately. You'd be earning what you deserve, making decisions, having authority. And Garrett would lose his cash cow. She paused, letting the truth sink in like poison. Someone skilled enough to do the work of 4 people without complaining. Someone who believed the lie that he wasn't good enough, so he kept pushing harder, working longer, never asking questions, never threatening Garrett's scheme, because you thought you were the problem. The truth of it hit Daniel like a freight train. He stood up suddenly, the chair scraping against the floor, and walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. Seattle's lights glittered in the distance. All those people living normal lives where their bosses did not lie to them, where their hard work was actually recognized, where they did not sacrifice everything for nothing. How long have you known? The question came out like an accusation because that was exactly what it was. Daniel kept his back to her, staring at his reflection in the dark window glass. 40 years old, looked 50, face haggard with exhaustion, eyes hollow with defeat that should not have been there if someone had just told him the truth 2 years ago. I discovered the financial anomalies 8 weeks ago. Elena's voice was steady but quiet. It took 6 of those 8 weeks to gather irrefutable evidence, legal proof that would stand up to scrutiny. 2 weeks ago, I had enough to act. I confronted Garrett 1 week ago. Daniel spun around, and he did not care that he was yelling at the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company in his own kitchen, did not care that she could destroy whatever remained of his career with a phone call, did not care about anything except the fact that she had known for 8 weeks while he worked himself to death thinking he was failing his daughter. "And you waited until now to tell me?" Elena flinched but did not look away, did not make excuses, did not try to justify the delay. Just sat there and took it, absorbing his anger like she deserved every ounce of it. "I needed legal proof before I could act. Garrett is not the only one doing this. It's happening in 4 other departments. 11 employees total being exploited the same way you are. I needed to understand the full scope before I could move without destroying everything and accomplishing nothing." Daniel turned back to the window because looking at her was too hard, because her explanation made sense, and he hated that it made sense. Hated that she had been protecting the company and other victims while he had been drowning. Hated that he understood the logic even as it burned through his chest like acid. "Why are you here?" His voice came out quieter now, drained of the rage that had been the only thing holding him upright. "Why didn't you send HR? Have your lawyers handle this? Why show up in my kitchen at 11 at night?" The question hung in the air between them, and Daniel heard Elena stand, heard her footsteps on his cheap linoleum floor, felt her presence beside him at the window, even though she did not touch him. When he glanced sideways at her reflection in the glass, the Ice Queen was gone. Just a woman standing in his kitchen, looking like she was carrying a weight too heavy for one person to bear. "When I saw your file, when I saw what's been done to you, I realized something." Her voice had gone soft, vulnerable in a way that made Daniel actually turn to look at her directly. "You have a daughter." A 7-year-old girl who barely sees her father because he's too busy being exploited by my company. "And your wife, Sarah, she passed away 3 years ago." Daniel nodded stiffly, not trusting his voice. The photograph on his refrigerator showed Lily at the park last summer, missing front tooth on full display, both of them laughing at something Daniel could not remember anymore. Sarah had taken that photo 2 months before the car accident that had turned his world inside out and left him to raise their daughter alone. "You've been raising Lily alone while working yourself to death for people who don't appreciate you, for a system I created, that I allowed to exist through my negligence." Tears were forming in Elena's eyes now, and Daniel had never imagined the Ice Queen was capable of tears, had never considered that the distant authority figure might feel anything about the people whose lives her decisions affected. "I sat in my office last night looking at your address, and I thought about calling, sending an email, having HR schedule a meeting. But none of that felt like enough." She gestured around his modest kitchen, at the dishes she had washed, at the floors she had swept, at the coffee maker she had cleaned while waiting for him to come home. "I know this doesn't fix anything. I know showing up here is intrusive and probably crazy. But I needed you to see that I know, that I'm not hiding behind my title or my lawyers, that I'm willing to stand in your kitchen and face what my company has done to you." The sincerity in her voice cracked something open in Daniel's chest. Anger and hope and grief all mixing together into something he could not name, could not process, could barely survive feeling. Numbers did not show a man collapsing on his couch every night because he was too exhausted to tuck his daughter into bed properly. They did not show someone skipping meals because rent and groceries in the same week felt like an impossible choice. Elena's words painted a picture of his life with uncomfortable accuracy, made him wonder how much research she had done, how deeply she had looked into the wreckage Garrett's lies had created. Daniel wanted to hate her, wanted to blame her for all of it because she was the CEO and the buck stopped with her. But the woman standing in his kitchen was not some untouchable corporate executive. She was human, flawed, trying desperately to fix something she had broken through negligence rather than malice. "I don't need your pity." The words came out quiet but firm, a line in the sand he needed to draw before whatever was happening here went further than he could handle. "Good, because I'm not offering pity." Elena stepped closer, and Daniel could see the exhaustion written into every line of her face, could see someone who had been awake for days trying to untangle a mess of her own making. "I'm offering respect and a partnership." She pulled a document from her bag, a formal job offer on Apex Technologies' letterhead. Operations manager position, $95,000 salary, real benefits, 40-hour weeks maximum. The numbers looked fake, too good to be real after 2 years of barely scraping by. "You know this company inside and out, Daniel. You know where the problems are because you've lived them. Help me fix this, not just for you, but for everyone else stuck in the same trap Garrett created. Help me rebuild the system so it protects people instead of exploiting them." Daniel crossed his arms, a defensive posture he could not quite abandon even as his anger started to fade into something more complicated, something that felt dangerously close to hope, mixed with fear of being disappointed again. "And if I say no?" "Then you say no." Elena met his eyes without hesitation. "I'll still make the changes. Still deal with Garrett and anyone else who's been exploiting my employees. Still ensure you're compensated for what was done to you. But it won't be as effective without someone who understands what it's really like down there on the floor." She paused, and the honesty in her gaze was almost painful to witness. "I need you, Daniel. The company needs you. And whether you believe it or not, I think you need this too. A chance to prove that your skills matter. That you're not just surviving, but building something better for people like you." Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was wrong, but exhaustion was catching up to him now that the adrenaline was fading. Exhaustion and the crushing weight of 2 years of lies finally being exposed. 2 years of thinking he was failing when he had been succeeding. 2 years of believing he was not enough when he had been more than enough all along. "I need time to think." Elena nodded immediately, relief crossing her features like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "Take all the time you need. I'll have the formal offer sent over tomorrow. No obligation to accept, no pressure. Just please, think about it." She moved toward the door, gathering her bag and her discarded heels. But she paused at the threshold, looking back at the photograph on his refrigerator. Daniel and Lily at the park, both of them laughing, both of them whole, before the weight of Garrett's lies had started crushing the life out of him, bit by bit. "She looks like you. Same eyes." Daniel felt himself soften despite everything, despite the anger and confusion and overwhelming exhaustion threatening to drag him under. "People say she has her mother's smile. I'm sorry for your loss. I can't imagine raising a child alone." The sympathy in Elena's voice sounded genuine, not performative, not the kind of empty condolence people offered at funerals before moving on with their lives. Real grief for a loss she had no connection to, except through the man standing in this kitchen, wondering if his life was about to change or if this was just another lie waiting to collapse. "Do you have kids?" The question came out before Daniel could stop it, curiosity overriding his better judgment. "No. No husband, no kids. No life outside work, really." The admission came out matter-of-fact, but Daniel heard the loneliness underneath it, recognized it because he had been living with a different kind of loneliness for 3 years, the kind that came from losing your partner and never quite figuring out how to be whole again, the kind that whispered in the empty spaces of an apartment after your daughter went to sleep that you were failing at the one job that mattered most. "For what it's worth, what you did tonight, coming here, most CEOs wouldn't." Elena smiled, small and sad, like she was remembering something painful. Most CEOs didn't build their company from nothing, didn't start as the underdog fighting for every dollar. I used to be you, Daniel, working impossible hours for people who didn't see me. I just forgot somewhere along the way. Let the success blind me to what actually matters. The words hung in the air between them, a moment of connection that felt too intimate for a CEO and an employee meeting for the first time in any meaningful way. Then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her, and Daniel was alone in his kitchen with performance reviews that told 2 different stories and a job offer that felt too good to be true. He stood there for a long time, holding the blue folder with his real performance data, staring at numbers that proved he was not the failure he had spent 2 years believing himself to be. For the first time in 2 years, he felt something other than exhausted. He felt hope, and that terrified him more than anything Garrett Holloway had ever done. 2 in the morning found Daniel sitting at his laptop, the glow of the screen the only light in his living room. Sleep was impossible. His mind kept circling back to Elena's revelations, to Garrett's theft, to 2 years of lies finally exposed. But underneath the anger and shock, a different question was forming, demanding attention he could not ignore. If this had happened to him, how many others were suffering the same way? Daniel logged into the Apex Technologies employee portal, his fingers moving across the keyboard with purpose born from 12 years of Navy discipline. He started cross-referencing data, looking for patterns he had missed because he had been too focused on surviving each day. Who else reported to Garrett? What were their work hours? Were there complaints buried in forums or emails that he had overlooked? He found a forum post from 8 months ago, buried in the company's internal message board, where employees vented about everything from parking to cafeteria food. Anonymous user. Simple message that Daniel had probably scrolled past a dozen times without really seeing it because he had been too tired to care about anyone else's problems when his own felt insurmountable. Anyone else in operations working insane hours? Feels like we're short-staffed, but management says the budget is fine. Daniel's heart rate picked up, that same adrenaline surge from earlier returning with a vengeance. He created a reply under his own username, not caring about anonymity anymore because Elena's visit had stripped away whatever fear he had left about speaking up. "I need to talk to you. It's important. More important than you know." He hit send and sat back, watching the cursor blink on the screen. No response would come until morning at the earliest, but Daniel felt like he had just done something, taken an action instead of just absorbing blow after blow, made a choice to fight back instead of accepting that this was just how things were. His phone buzzed at 7 the next morning, pulling him from fitful sleep on the couch where he had finally collapsed around 4. A message from an unknown number lit up the screen. "This is Tech Guru _206 from the forum. Got your message. Not sure what this is about, but something in your post felt urgent. Coffee at 8? Pike Street Starbucks?" Daniel typed back immediately, his thumbs moving faster than his still foggy brain could fully process. "I'll be there." The man sitting at the corner table looked young, maybe 29, with the kind of nervous energy that came from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. He wore an Apex Technologies IT department polo, his laptop bag slung over the back of his chair like he had come straight from an overnight shift. Dark circles under his eyes matched Daniel's own, the universal badge of people working themselves to death for companies that did not care. "Daniel Carter." The younger man nodded and half stood to shake hands, his grip firm but quick, the handshake of someone always in a hurry. "Jake Mitchell, network technician. I posted that forum thing 8 months ago when I was too tired to remember not to complain on company platforms." Daniel sat down with his own coffee, black because adding cream and sugar felt like too much effort this morning. He studied Jake, seeing himself reflected back. Same exhaustion, same confusion about why the workload never decreased, no matter how many hours they put in. Same quiet desperation of someone drowning, but too proud to call for help. "How many hours are you working?" Jake laughed, but there was no humor in the sound, just bitterness wrapped in resignation. 60 a week, 70. I stopped counting around the time my wife started asking if I still lived at our house, or if I had moved into the server room. Garrett says we're understaffed, says budget constraints mean we can't hire anyone new. Says if I want to move up, I need to prove I can handle the workload. Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. The same script, the same lies, different victim. Garrett had been running this con on multiple people, creating phantom employees across different departments, pocketing salaries while real human beings destroyed their lives trying to meet impossible standards. What if I told you Garrett's been lying? That there are no budget constraints? That he's been reporting phantom contractors and pocketing their salaries while making you do their work? Jake's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth, suspended in air as his brain tried to process what Daniel had just said. His eyes went wide, then narrow, cycling through disbelief and anger and something that looked like relief mixed with horror. "That's insane. You're saying Garrett's been stealing?" Daniel pulled out the printouts Elena had given him. The evidence of Garrett's fraud spread across the small coffee shop table like an indictment. Phantom contractors with fake names and real bank accounts. Payroll fraud spanning 2 years. Systematic exploitation of employees who thought they were failing when they were actually being robbed. Holy hell. Jake set his cup down with shaking hands, his eyes scanning the documents with the speed of someone trained to parse technical data quickly. Daniel watched recognition dawn on his face, watched the pieces click into place, watched 2 years of self-doubt transform into righteous fury in the space of 30 seconds. I thought I was going crazy. Thought I just wasn't good enough, wasn't fast enough. My wife keeps asking why I'm never home, and I don't have a good answer except that I'm always behind. If I don't catch up, I'll get fired. You're not behind. You're doing the work of multiple people, just like I was. Daniel leaned forward, keeping his voice low, even though the coffee shop was mostly empty at this hour. The morning rush had not started yet, giving them privacy that felt both fortunate and fragile. The CEO found out 2 days ago. She came to my house last night to tell me. But I need to know how many others there are. Garrett supervised 12 people according to Elena. I need to find them. Jake's eyes widened even further, if that was possible. His voice dropped to a whisper. Victoria Hayes came to your house? The Ice Queen herself showed up at your door? Elena Morrison, and she's not what people think. The words came out defensive, surprising Daniel with their vehemence. He barely knew Elena, had spent one conversation with her, but something about the way she had stood in his kitchen, vulnerable and honest, and taking responsibility for failures that were not entirely her fault, made him want to defend her against casual dismissal. Jake looked at him strangely, but did not comment on Daniel's tone. Instead, he pulled out his own phone, scrolling through contacts with practiced efficiency. "I know 3 other guys in operations. We grab beers sometimes, complain about the hours. If this is real, if Garrett's been doing this to all of us, can you get them together? Somewhere off company property?" Jake thought for a moment, his fingers still scrolling through his phone. "My buddy Dex owns a garage in Georgetown. Sullivan's Auto. We could meet there tonight if you want privacy." Daniel nodded, feeling pieces of a plan starting to form in his mind. Elena had evidence, had started the investigation, but she was working from the top down through official channels and legal processes. Daniel could work from the bottom up, could find the other victims, could give them the truth they deserved, could help Elena build a case that would destroy Garrett's whole operation and maybe, just maybe, create something better from the wreckage. "Tonight, 7 p.m. Tell them it's important, but don't give details over company email." Jake stood, shaking Daniel's hand again, this time with more firmness, more conviction, like he was sealing a pact instead of just saying goodbye. "I don't know what you're doing, but thank you for not staying quiet. For giving a damn." Sullivan's Auto occupied a corner lot in Georgetown, the kind of place that looked like it had been there since the 50s and would probably outlast the gentrification creeping through Seattle's industrial neighborhoods. The bay doors were closed when Daniel arrived at 10 minutes to 7, but he could see light spilling from underneath and hear the sound of voices inside. Dexter Sullivan answered his knock. A man in his mid-40s with grease-stained hands and the kind of face that had seen hard years but had not lost its capacity for warmth. Former Navy mechanic, like Daniel. They had served at different times on different ships, but there was a kinship in shared experience that transcended the specifics. "Reynolds, Jake said you needed the space for something important." Daniel stepped inside, seeing Jake and 3 other men standing around a workbench that had been cleared of tools. All of them wore the same expression Daniel had seen in the mirror this morning. Exhaustion mixed with curiosity, mixed with the kind of hope people developed when they were drowning and someone threw them a rope. "Everyone here works under Garrett Holloway." Nods all around. Daniel took a breath, feeling the weight of what he was about to say settle on his shoulders like a physical burden. These men were about to learn that 2 years of their lives had been stolen, that their suffering had been manufactured, that they were not failures but victims of a systematic fraud designed to exploit their dedication and work ethic for someone else's financial gain. He told them everything. Elena's visit, the phantom contractors with fake names and real bank accounts. 2 years of systematic fraud. Falsified performance reviews designed to keep them from advancing. Stolen wages funneled into Garrett Holloway's personal accounts while they destroyed their bodies and missed their families and believed the lie that they simply were not good enough. By the time Daniel finished, the garage was silent except for the hum of the space heater in the corner. 5 men standing in a mechanic's garage on a Friday night, processing the information that their lives had been deliberately sabotaged by someone they had trusted to lead them. A man Daniel did not know spoke first, his voice rough with barely contained rage. "You're telling me I missed my son's birth because I was covering an emergency call that Garrett created? Because some fake contractor needed to justify overtime that was going into Garrett's pocket?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you." Daniel met each man's eyes in turn, making sure they understood the full scope of what had been done to them. "Elena Morrison is handling this through legal channels. She's building a case. But we can help.
We can document our own experiences, pull records that show the reality of what we've been going through. Give her ammunition she can use to make sure this never happens again.
Not just to us, but to anyone else who might be vulnerable to this kind of exploitation. Jake spoke up from his position, leaning against a toolbox, his arms crossed over his chest. That sounds a lot like we'd be accessing company systems, going through data we might not technically have clearance for. We'd be using our own credentials to check our own time records, our own work orders, our own performance data. Nothing illegal about an employee verifying their own information. Dex laughed, the sound echoing in the high-ceilinged space. That's some creative interpretation of policy, Reynolds. You got a better idea? Silence answered him. Then, one by one, the men started nodding, committing themselves to action instead of passive acceptance, choosing to fight back instead of continuing to absorb punishment they had not earned and did not deserve. The men got to work with the focused intensity of people who had finally been given permission to fight back. Jake set up his laptop on the cleared workbench, fingers flying across the keyboard as he dove into server logs and network activity records. The others spread out across the garage, making lists on yellow legal pads Dex had scrounged from his office. Suspicious work orders that had appeared out of nowhere, phantom emergencies that had pulled them away from families at midnight, equipment purchases that never materialized but somehow got charged to departmental budgets. 3 hours later, they had everything compiled on 3 encrypted USB drives. Time clock manipulations showing systematic deletion of overtime hours across all 5 employees. Work orders that had been modified after completion to make productivity metrics look lower than actual performance. Equipment requisition forms for tools that were supposedly delivered to remote contractors who did not exist. Emergency maintenance calls created from thin air to justify Garrett's own inflated overtime, while his crew handled crises that should never have occurred. Jake held up one of the drives, the small piece of plastic and metal catching the overhead fluorescent light. This is enough to bury him. Question is, what do we do with it? Daniel took the drive, feeling the weight of 2 years of systematic theft condensed into something small enough to fit in his palm. Evidence that could not be denied or explained away. Proof that would stand up in court and destroy whatever remained of Garrett Holloway's career and freedom. I give it to Elena. Let her use it however she needs to build the case. You trust her that much? Marcus Webb, one of the technicians whose name had been stolen for a phantom contractor, asked the question everyone else was thinking. Daniel thought about the woman in his kitchen, the tears that had formed in her eyes when she talked about failing her employees, the way she had washed his dishes like she was trying to physically scrub away guilt that sat on her shoulders heavier than any mechanical system Daniel had ever installed. Yeah, I think I do. Monday morning, Daniel walked into Apex Technologies with a USB drive in his jacket pocket and a determination in his spine that had been absent for 2 years. He did not stop at his locker in the maintenance bay, did not check in with the shift supervisor who would want to know why he was 3 hours early, walked straight past the employee break room where guys were grabbing coffee and complaining about Seahawks losing to the 49ers yesterday, rode the elevator to the executive floor where people wore suits instead of coveralls and dealt in abstractions like quarterly projections instead of concrete realities like broken compressors. Garrett Holloway's office occupied a corner space with windows overlooking Elliott Bay. Gray hair perfectly styled despite the early hour, belly straining against his button-down shirt in a way that spoke of expense account lunches and desk jobs that did not require physical labor. Face buried in his computer screen, probably reviewing whatever numbers he planned to fabricate for the week ahead. He looked up when Daniel knocked, surprise flickering across his features before being replaced with his usual condescending smile.
the expression of a man who had been getting away with theft for 2 years and saw no reason that would change. "Carter, what are you doing up here? Shouldn't you be on the floor fixing something?" Daniel stepped inside and closed the door behind him with deliberate care. Set the USB drive on Garrett's desk like he was placing evidence at a crime scene. Met his supervisor's eyes without flinching. "I want to talk about phantom contractors." The color drained from Garrett's face so fast, Daniel thought the man might actually pass out. But he recovered quickly, corporate survival instincts kicking in, plastering on a confused expression that might have been convincing if Daniel had not spent Friday night looking at irrefutable proof of his crimes. "I don't know what you're talking about." Daniel opened his laptop, the one he had brought specifically for this moment, pulled up the files Jake had extracted, and projected them onto Garrett's own monitor without asking permission. Employee records filling the screen in damning detail. Employee ID 4782, Marcus Webb, hired 20 months ago. Salary $52,000 annually. Bank deposits to Wells Fargo account 8291. Account holder Garrett Holloway. He let that sink in for 3 seconds before continuing. "Marcus Webb doesn't exist, but the money going into your account sure does." Garrett stood up fast enough that his chair rolled backward and hit the wall with a hollow thud. His hands came down flat on the desk, knuckles white with pressure. "Where did you get that? That's confidential financial information. You're not authorized to access." "Elena Morrison gave it to me. She's been investigating you for 8 weeks. Daniel pulled up the next screen without waiting for a response. Time clock data showing systematic deletions of overtime across multiple employees. Work orders modified after completion to suppress performance metrics. Equipment purchases that vanished into accounting black holes. But I didn't come here to talk about what she knows. I came to show you what I know. What 11 other people you've been exploiting know." He advanced through screen after screen, each one another nail in Garrett's coffin. Documentation so thorough and comprehensive that no lawyer could argue it away. Evidence that would stand up in criminal court and destroy whatever remained of the man's freedom. "We've documented everything, Garrett. Every lie, every manipulation, every dollar you stole while we destroyed our bodies trying to meet impossible standards you created." The mask dropped completely. Garrett's face twisted with rage, all pretense of confusion abandoned like a costume that no longer served its purpose. "You don't know what you're doing, Carter. I've been here 8 years. I have allies, connections, people who owe me favors. One word from me and you'll never work in this industry again." Daniel stood slowly, making sure Garrett could see he was not intimidated, not backing down, not the same broken man who had believed for 2 years that his own inadequacy was the problem. "You stole from me, from my daughter. You made me think I was failing when I was actually exceeding every metric you supposedly measured. You destroyed my confidence, my health, my time with my kid." He leaned forward, hands flat on the desk, getting close enough to see the fear starting to replace anger in Garrett's eyes. "That's over. You've already done your worst. For 2 years you've been doing your worst, and I survived it. So go ahead. Make your threats. Call your allies. Try to blacklist me. I'm done being afraid of you." Daniel walked out before Garrett could respond, leaving the USB drive on the desk like a grenade with the pin pulled. His hands were shaking, but his head was high. For the first time in 2 years, he had stood up to the man who had been systematically destroying him, had looked Garrett Holloway in the eye, and refused to back down. had chosen to fight instead of accepting that this was just how things were. He made it to the elevator before his phone rang. Elena's name on the screen. "Daniel, what did you do?" "Garrett just stormed into my office demanding I fire you for harassment and unauthorized access to company files." Daniel could not help the smile that spread across his face, despite the adrenaline still coursing through his system. "I confronted him, showed him the evidence,
Told him we know everything." Silence on the other end of the line, then a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been exasperation, possibly both. "Get up here, now, and bring whatever evidence you have." Daniel found Elena in her office with a full legal team assembled like an army preparing for war. 3 lawyers in expensive suits, faces severe, taking notes on tablets and legal pads. Garrett pacing near the windows, ranting about insubordination and corporate espionage and employees who did not know their place. His voice got louder the moment Daniel walked in, performance ramping up for the audience. "There! Arrest him! He hacked company servers, stole confidential information. This is industrial espionage." Elena held up one hand, and Garrett actually stopped talking. The Ice Queen was fully present now, and Daniel understood why people feared her. There was steel in her spine and absolute authority in her voice. "Mr. Holloway, sit down." Garrett sat. Elena turned to Daniel, her expression unreadable behind the professional mask she wore like armor. "Show me what you have." Daniel connected his laptop to the conference room screen and walked them through everything Jake had compiled. The time clock manipulations showing deleted overtime across 5 employees spanning 2 years. Work order modifications that suppressed performance metrics to justify denying promotions. Equipment fraud where requisitions went through proper channels, but nothing ever arrived at job sites. Systematic exploitation designed to create impossible workloads while funneling money into Garrett's personal accounts. The lawyers took notes, asked pointed questions, cross-referenced data with the investigation Elena had already conducted independently. By the time Daniel finished his presentation, Garrett had gone pale again, all his bluster deflated like a punctured tire. One of the lawyers, a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and the bearing of someone who had prosecuted white-collar crime before moving to corporate law, spoke up. Her voice was professionally neutral, but Daniel heard the anger underneath. "Mr. Holloway, based on this evidence and our independent investigation, we're prepared to recommend immediate termination for cause. Additionally, the company will be filing a criminal complaint with the Seattle Police Department for fraud and embezzlement." "You can't do this. I have a contract. I have rights." Garrett's voice cracked on the last word, desperation replacing arrogance. Elena stood, and something in her posture made even the lawyers go quiet. "You have the right to legal representation. You have the right to due process. What you don't have is the right to steal from my company and exploit my employees." She nodded to her head of security, a former police officer who had been standing quietly by the door throughout the entire confrontation. The man moved forward with the practiced efficiency of someone who had made hundreds of arrests. "Escort Mr. Holloway from the building. Remote wipe his laptop and phone. He's suspended pending completion of our investigation." Garrett was still protesting as security let him out, his voice echoing down the hallway outside Elena's office. But the power had drained from his words. He was just a man who had gotten caught and was facing consequences he had convinced himself would never come. When the door closed behind him, Elena sank into her chair like someone had cut the strings holding her upright. She looked at Daniel with an expression he could not quite read. Not anger, not gratitude. Something more complicated that sat between those poles.
That was either the bravest thing you've ever done or the most foolish.
Had to be done. He was never going to stop unless someone stood up to him. You could have gotten yourself fired or arrested if Garrett's accusations had any merit. But they didn't, because what we did was legal. What he did wasn't. Elena looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition, like she was seeing him as something other than a victim for the first time. I want you to work with me, not just take the operations manager position, directly involved in the reforms. Every policy change, every oversight mechanism, every protection we put in place. I want your input because you lived it. You know what actually needs to change. Daniel felt the weight of that offer settle on his shoulders. This was more than a job, more than a promotion. This was a partnership with someone who controlled the entire company. A chance to actually fix the system that had broken him, instead of just escaping it. I'm in, but I want something in return. Name it. I want the other 11 victims involved too, not just me. They deserve to be part of building something better. Elena smiled, and it transformed her face in a way Daniel had not seen before. Made her look younger, less like the Ice Queen, and more like the woman who had stood in his kitchen trying to make amends. Partners, then. Daniel shook her hand, feeling the firmness of her grip, the certainty in it. Partners. 3 weeks later, Daniel sat in his new office feeling like an imposter wearing someone else's life. The operations manager space had windows overlooking the maintenance bay where he had spent 2 years destroying his body. Dual monitors glowed with spreadsheets full of numbers that might as well have been hieroglyphics. His desk phone had an extension that rang with questions he did not always know how to answer. Business cards sat in a holder with his name printed in clean sans serif font that felt like mockery every time he looked at them. His first major decision cost the company $3,000. He had approved overtime for a maintenance crew without routing the request through finance first, bypassing protocols he had not known existed. The rejection email arrived within an hour, copied to Elena and half the accounting department. Heat crawled up Daniel's neck as he read the formal reprimand couched in corporate speak about proper authorization chains and budgetary controls. The second mistake came 2 days later when he tried to hire an additional HVAC technician without securing budget approval from the quarterly planning committee. A group Daniel had not known existed until the HR director called him personally, her voice dripping with the kind of patience people reserved for children and incompetence. Mr. Carter, we have processes for headcount requests. You can't just decide we need another body and start posting job listings. Daniel had apologized, hung up, and stared at his monitors, wondering how people survived in environments where doing the right thing required 15 signatures and a committee vote. By the end of week 1, he had sent an email to the entire company announcing a safety protocol change without running it past communications first. That one earned him a personal visit from the PR director, a woman named Sheila, who explained in excruciating detail why company-wide announcements needed review. What if your email had created liability? What if it contradicted our insurance policies? What if reporters had picked it up and misconstrued your intent? I was trying to keep people safe. Sheila's expression suggested this was the wrong answer. That intent mattered less than process, that the machinery of corporate bureaucracy existed for reasons Daniel was too naive to understand. Elena called him to her office at 7 that evening. Daniel trudged up to the executive floor, expecting to be fired or demoted or sent back to the maintenance bay, where at least he understood the rules. Instead, he found her sitting on the floor of her office, surrounded by policy manuals and procedural documents. Her suit jacket was discarded over a chair. Her hair had escaped its usual tight bun. She looked exhausted and human in a way that made Daniel's defensive anger deflate. Sit.
Daniel sat on the floor across from her because the informality of it felt less intimidating than perching in one of her guest chairs while she lectured him about his failures. "Your first 3 weeks have been a disaster." "I know." "Good. Self-awareness is the first step." Elena pushed a 3-ring binder toward him. Approval workflows, authorization matrices, communication protocols, budgetary thresholds. The bureaucratic machinery that kept a corporation running without descending into chaos. You can't just approve things because they're right, Daniel. You have to navigate the system, understand the channels, know who needs to sign off before you move. Frustration bubbled up, hot and bitter in his throat. The system is what let Garrett steal for 2 years. The system is what kept me working impossible hours while everyone looked the other way. Now you're telling me I have to work within it? Yes, because until we change it, trying to operate outside just creates chaos. We work within the framework while we build something better. We use the rules to rewrite the rules. Daniel wanted to argue, but exhaustion won out. He had spent 12 years in the Navy where following procedures was gospel. Somehow he had forgotten that lesson in civilian life. Or maybe he had just been too tired to care about anything except surviving each shift. "Show me how." Elena's expression softened into something that might have been approval. She pulled out her laptop and walked him through every mistake he had made that week, showing him the proper workflow for each decision, the forms that needed filing, the people who required notification, the approval chains that turned simple choices into multi-day processes that felt designed to prevent anything from actually happening. In the military, I just did the job. Nobody needed 3 signatures to replace a compressor. The military has different accountability structures, different command hierarchies. Corporate America runs on distributing liability and covering vulnerabilities. Welcome to middle management, where 80% of your time is paperwork and 20% is actual work. Daniel laughed, despite himself, the sound surprising them both in the quiet office. I preferred 100% fixing broken things. Too late. You're in the office trap now. No escape. The easy banter caught him off guard, made him see Elena as something other than the CEO who had upended his life. Just a woman who had probably made her own share of mistakes climbing the corporate ladder, who understood what it meant to feel out of place in a role that did not quite fit. They worked until past 10, Elena drilling him on approval processes until Daniel's head spun with organizational charts and decision trees. She ordered Thai food from a place that delivered late. They ate straight from containers while going over budget allocation procedures that made Daniel's eyes glaze over. "You're being patient with me." "You think so? Most people find me terrifying." "You are terrifying, but you're also trying to help." Elena set down her pad thai and looked at him directly, something shifting in her expression that Daniel could not quite name. "I don't want you to fail, Daniel. I need you to succeed." Not just for the company, but because if you can't make this transition, it proves the system is too broken to fix from the inside. You're not just learning a job, you're proving that people from the bottom can rise up and change things if given the chance. The weight of that statement settled between them like a physical presence. Daniel was more than an employee being promoted. He was a test case, proof of concept, evidence that the system could work if people with actual integrity were given power instead of just people who knew how to navigate bureaucracy. No pressure then? Immense pressure. But I think you can handle it. Daniel drove home that night with his head full of procedures and his chest full of something that felt dangerously like belonging. Saturday afternoon found Daniel at Pike Place Market with Lily, watching his daughter weave between vendors' stalls with the boundless energy only 7-year-olds possessed. She had been staying with Beth all week while Daniel adjusted to his new schedule. Guilt sat heavy in his chest every time he looked at her. New job or not, he was still missing her life in increments that added up to absence. Lily stopped at a flower vendor, her small hands reaching towards sunflowers taller than she was. "Can we get flowers for Aunt Beth? She let me make cookies, and I got flour everywhere, and she didn't even get mad." Daniel handed over $10 and watched Lily carefully select 3 sunflowers, her face serious with the concentration of making an important decision. His phone buzzed with a text from Beth. "Emma keeps asking about the nice lady from work who helped you. When were you planning to mention you've been spending late nights with the CEO?" Daniel's face heated, even though no one around him could see the message. He typed back quickly, defensive instinct kicking in. "It's not like that. She's helping me learn the job." "Sure. And I'm the Queen of England. Lily wants to meet her. Says you smile different when you talk about her." Daniel looked at his daughter arranging sunflowers in her arms and felt his carefully constructed boundaries starting to crack. Lily was too perceptive, too smart. She had noticed things Daniel had been trying not to notice himself. The way his pulse kicked up when Elena's name appeared on his phone. The way he found excuses to stop by her office with questions that could have been emails. The way she laughed at his terrible jokes about corporate bureaucracy and made him feel clever instead of foolish. He made a decision that was probably stupid, but felt necessary. Pulled up Elena's number and typed before he could second-guess himself. "I know this is weird, but Lily's been asking about you. Would you want to get coffee with both of us? Nothing formal, just—" He trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence without making it sound like something it was not, or maybe could not be. Or should not be, but he was starting to want anyway. Elena's response came after a pause long enough to make Daniel regret the impulse. "Coffee with Lily? That sounds... I'd like that. Yes. Pike Place Cafe tomorrow, 2 p.m.? I'll be there." Elena arrived at exactly 2, wearing jeans that looked soft and worn instead of pressed and perfect. A cream-colored sweater that made her look approachable instead of untouchable. Hair falling loose past her shoulders in waves Daniel had never seen because she always wore it pinned up tight at work. She looked younger, more human. Less like the Ice Queen and more like someone he might have met in completely different circumstances. Lily spotted her first and waved with both hands like she was flagging down a rescue plane. "You're really pretty. Daddy said you were nice, but he didn't say pretty." Daniel wanted the earth to open up and swallow him whole. Elena's laugh saved him, genuine and warm, and nothing like the controlled professional sound he heard in meetings. "Thank you, Lily. You're pretty too. I love your dress. Are those butterflies?" "Magic butterflies. They're different from regular butterflies because they grant wishes, but only if you're really, really nice." Elena sat down across from them, and Daniel watched something in her posture shift. The corporate armor fell away completely, replaced by genuine curiosity as Lily launched into an explanation of butterfly mythology that apparently involved rainbow forests and children being brave. "Did your mommy tell you about them too?" A shadow crossed Elena's face so quick Daniel almost missed it. "No, sweetheart. My mom wasn't really the storytelling type." Lily considered this with the seriousness of a child who could not imagine a childhood without stories. "That's sad. Stories are important. Daddy tells me stories every night. Well, he used to, before he got so tired." The observation landed like an accusation, even though Lily's tone held no judgment, just a 7-year-old stating facts she had learned to accept. Daniel felt Elena's eyes on him, but could not meet her gaze. Your dad's been working very hard, but that's going to change now. He won't be so tired anymore. That's what he says, but grown-ups say lots of things. The casual cynicism from someone so young made Elena's expression crack into something raw. She reached across the table and took Lily's hand with a gentleness that surprised Daniel. I promise we're going to make things better for your dad, and for lots of other people too. Lily studied Elena's face like she was searching for lies, then nodded with the gravity of someone accepting an oath. Okay, I believe you. You have kind eyes. They spent the next hour drawing on napkins. Lily showed Elena how to shade butterfly wings with the side of a pencil. Elena taught Lily a technique for drawing perfect circles she had learned in an art class years ago. Daniel watched them together and felt something dangerous blooming in his chest. Something that looked like family, like belonging, like a future he had stopped letting himself imagine after Sarah died. Lily needed the bathroom and skipped off with explicit instructions not to talk to strangers. The moment she was out of earshot, Elena's composure crumbled slightly. She looked at Daniel with an expression that held too many emotions to parse. She's incredible. You're raising an amazing kid. Most days I feel like I'm barely keeping us afloat. That's parenting, or so I imagine. I wouldn't know. The loneliness in Elena's voice made Daniel really look at her. A woman who had sacrificed everything for a company that was supposed to mean something, who had woken up one day and realized she had built a prison of her own making, who was sitting in a coffee shop drawing butterflies with a 7-year-old and looking more alive than he had ever seen her in the sterile corporate environment where they usually crossed paths. Lily asked me something this morning. Elena's attention sharpened, her entire focus shifting to him in a way that made the crowded cafe feel suddenly intimate. She asked if you were going to be her new mom. The words hung between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Elena's hands stilled on the napkin she had been doodling on, her breath catching in a way that was almost imperceptible, but Daniel caught it anyway. What did you tell her? I told her families come in lots of different shapes, that sometimes people who aren't related by blood can still care about each other. That's diplomatic. Daniel leaned forward, keeping his voice low, even though the cafe noise would drown them out to anyone more than a few feet away. She's already attached to you after one coffee date, and I need you to know that if this, whatever this is between us, if it goes wrong, it won't just hurt me. It'll hurt her. And I won't let her get hurt again. Elena met his eyes, and he saw fear there. Real, genuine fear of the kind that came from someone who had never let themselves be vulnerable enough to risk this kind of damage. I don't know how to do this. Any of this. I've never had a relationship that lasted longer than 3 months. I work 80 hours a week. I don't know how to be someone's anything. Neither do I. Not since Sarah died. They sat in that honesty for a moment. Two people who were disasters at relationships for completely different reasons, connected by a 7-year-old who believed in magic butterflies and second chances. Then Lily returned with a cookie the size of her head that some kind stranger had apparently given her, and the moment of vulnerability passed. But Daniel felt it lingering between them for the rest of the afternoon as Lily chattered about school and showed Elena pictures on his phone of her science fair project that had spectacularly failed in front of the entire class. Monday morning, Daniel arrived at work to find his phone exploding with notifications. 53 text messages, 27 missed calls. His inbox flooded with emails from colleagues, reporters, numbers he did not recognize. Beth's name topped the call list, and he dialed back immediately, his chest tightening with the certainty that something had gone catastrophically wrong. "Turn on the news, now!" Daniel pulled up Como 4 on his phone, and his stomach dropped through the floor. The reporter stood outside Apex Technologies' main entrance, where protesters were already gathering behind her, with signs demanding justice and accountability. The ticker running across the bottom of the screen made his blood run cold. Breaking. Apex Technologies accused of systematic employee exploitation. Internal documents leaked. The reporter's voice cut through the buzzing in Daniel's ears, each word landing like a physical blow. Sources have provided Como 4 with internal audit reports showing that Operations Director Garrett Holloway allegedly created phantom contractors, embezzled nearly $300,000, and falsified performance reviews to cover his tracks. The question now facing CEO Elena Morrison: what did she know, and when did she know it? Daniel's hands shook as he scrolled through his messages. Reporters requesting interviews, co-workers asking if the news was true, anonymous numbers offering money for his story. The carefully controlled investigation Elena had been running through legal channels had just exploded into the public sphere in the worst possible way. His phone rang with Elena's name appearing on the screen. "Don't talk to anyone. Don't comment. Don't confirm or deny anything. I'm sending a car to pick you up. We're going into crisis mode." The car arrived within 15 minutes, a town car with tinted windows that felt both ridiculous and necessary. Daniel climbed into the back seat, feeling like a criminal being transported to trial, watching Seattle pass by outside while his phone continued to buzz with incoming messages he was ignoring on Elena's orders. The Apex Technologies lobby looked like a war zone. Security had cordoned off the entrance where protesters shouted about corporate greed and worker exploitation. News vans filled the parking lot, satellite dishes pointed at the building like weapons preparing to fire. Daniel slipped in through the loading dock, guided by security to a service elevator that bypassed the chaos. The executive conference room held Elena, 3 lawyers including Patricia Reynolds, and PR director Sheila, who looked like she had not slept in days. Everyone turned when he entered, and Daniel felt the weight of their scrutiny like a physical presence pressing down on his shoulders. "Who leaked?" Elena's voice cut through the tension like a blade. She stood at the head of the table in full Ice Queen mode, no trace of the woman who had drawn butterflies with his daughter visible in her rigid posture. Patricia pulled up documents on the screen, her expression grave. "The leaked materials match our internal audit reports almost exactly. Whoever provided them to the press had access to materials that should have been restricted to this room and the investigation team. So we have a mole, or someone who thinks transparency is more important than corporate liability." Patricia's tone suggested she had strong opinions about which was worse. Sheila jumped in with the kind of manic energy that came from multiple espressos and impending disaster. "We need to get ahead of this. Issue a statement. Control the narrative before it controls us." One of the other lawyers immediately objected, his voice sharp with professional alarm. "Any statement that confirms the allegations creates liability exposure. We stay silent. Let our lawyers handle this through proper channels. Silence makes us look guilty, like we're hiding something. We're protecting the company from liability. That's our job." Voices started overlapping, lawyers and PR fighting for control of the response strategy. Daniel watched Elena's face go from controlled to barely restrained fury as the arguing escalated, her hands clenching and unclenching at her sides. "Enough." The single word cut through the chaos like a gunshot. Everyone went silent. Elena straightened to her full height, and Daniel saw the woman who had built a company from nothing, who commanded respect through sheer force of will. "We release a statement. Full transparency." "Elena, that increases our legal exposure significantly." "I don't care." Her voice had gone cold and final in a way that brooked no argument. "We did wrong. We're fixing it. That's the truth. That's what we're going to say." Sheila leaned forward, her PR instincts kicking into overdrive despite the obvious danger. We could position this as new leadership cleaning house. Make you the hero who discovered the problem and took action. Turn the narrative to your favor. No. Elena's response was immediate and sharp as broken glass. I'm not the hero. I enabled this by not paying attention. We tell the truth. We failed our employees. We're making it right. No spin, no clever framing, just honesty. Daniel felt something shift in his chest, watching her reject the easy path. Admiration mixed with fear, mixed with desperate hope that honesty would be enough to save them from the storm gathering outside. Patricia pulled up polling data and focus group research, her expression darkening with each slide. The truth might not be enough. Shareholders are already calling for your resignation. The stock dropped 6% in the first hour of trading. If we admit fault without a strong counter-narrative, you could lose your position. Then I lose my position. I'd rather lose the company than lose myself protecting it. Daniel heard echoes of their conversation in his kitchen, about building something that mattered, about remembering why she started. He stood up before he could second-guess the impulse, feeling every eye in the room turn to him. Elena's right. His voice came out stronger than he felt, carrying the weight of 2 years watching the system fail people who deserved better. Hiding makes it worse. Covering up proves we haven't learned anything. We admit we failed. We show what we're doing to fix it. We prove that companies can change if they're willing to face hard truths. Sheila looked at him like he had just suggested setting money on fire in the parking lot. That's very idealistic, Mr. Carter. But we're dealing with real-world consequences here. Legal liability, stock prices, shareholder lawsuits, and 12 employees who spent 2 years being exploited while everyone looked the other way. They deserve better than corporate spin. The lawyers exchanged glances that Daniel could not read. Patricia pulled Elena aside for a hushed conversation, her voice low but urgent enough that fragments carried across the room. Unprecedented risk, liability exposure, potential criminal charges if this goes wrong. Elena listened, nodded, then turned back to the room with her decision made and immovable. We're doing a press conference, today. I'll make a statement, take questions, own what happened. And Daniel is coming with me. Absolutely not. Patricia's objection came fast and firm. Putting an affected employee on stage with you creates massive liability. He could say something off script, could open us up to lawsuits we haven't anticipated. He's part of this story. He deserves to be part of telling it. Elena looked at Daniel, asking a question without words. He nodded, committing himself to whatever came next. I'm in. The press conference was scheduled for 2 that afternoon, which gave them less than 3 hours to prepare. The team spent those hours crafting statements, anticipating questions, building a framework for honesty that would not create unnecessary legal exposure. Daniel watched Sheila work and grudgingly admitted she was good at her job. She was not trying to hide the truth, just present it in a way that acknowledged fault without inviting lawsuits. The press room was packed with every major Seattle outlet, national news stringers, tech industry reporters who had been covering Apex Technologies for years. Daniel stood backstage, watching the crowd through a gap in the curtains, his heart hammering against his ribs hard enough to hurt. You don't have to do this. Elena appeared beside him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that he had started associating with safety. Yes, I do. Those 12 people need to see that someone's standing up, that we're not hiding. You're braver than you give yourself credit for. What if this destroys everything you've built? Then I build something else, something better, something I'm not ashamed of. They called Elena's name, and she straightened her jacket, squared her shoulders, and walked onto the stage with her head high. Daniel followed 2 steps behind, feeling like he was walking into battle without armor. Camera flashes exploded like artillery fire. Microphones bristled from the press section like weapons. Elena stepped to the podium, and the room went silent with a kind of anticipation that preceded either revelation or catastrophe. 8 weeks ago, I discovered something that fundamentally shook my understanding of the company I built. Apex Technologies, my company, had been systematically exploiting employees, not through policy, not through intention, but through negligence, through my failure to see what was happening right under my nose. Her voice never wavered as she laid out the facts with surgical precision. Garrett's fraud, the phantom contractors, the falsified reviews, the systematic theft of wages and dignity from 12 people who deserved infinitely better than what they had received. I take full responsibility for creating an environment where this could happen. I was so focused on growth, on quarterly earnings, on shareholder value, that I stopped seeing the human cost of my blind spots. She announced the settlements, the policy changes, the independent oversight board, the third-party review process for all future performance evaluations. $4.8 million in back pay and damages, money that would hurt quarterly earnings but was necessary for any claim to justice. A reporter's hand shot up the moment Elena paused for breath. "Ms. Morrison, should we expect criminal charges to be filed against you for enabling this fraud?" "I welcome any investigation. Full transparency and accountability. If prosecutors determine I bear legal responsibility, I'll face those consequences." "Who's the man standing beside you?" Daniel felt every eye in the room turn to him, like searchlights finding their target. His throat went dry, but he kept his spine straight, using every ounce of Navy discipline to maintain composure. "This is Daniel Carter, operations manager at Apex Technologies and one of the affected employees. He's been instrumental in developing our reform initiatives and ensuring we actually address the root causes of what happened." The same reporter focused on Daniel like a predator spotting weakness. "Mr. Carter, how do you feel working for the company that exploited you?" Every prepared answer Sheila had drilled into him evaporated. Daniel stepped to his own microphone and spoke from the gut, from the place where 2 years of pain and anger and desperate hope lived. Angry, betrayed, but also hopeful. "What happened to me was wrong. What Elena is doing about it is right. I'm staying because I believe companies can change if they're willing to face hard truths, and because the best way to honor my coworkers who suffered is to make sure it never happens again." "Aren't you afraid of retaliation?" The question hit a nerve Daniel had not known was exposed. He thought about Lily watching the news, about her learning that sometimes doing the right thing meant risking everything you had left. "Every day. But my daughter is watching. I want her to see that standing up for what's right matters, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." The words hung in the air, and Daniel saw a few reporters writing them down verbatim, saw others nodding slightly, their expressions shifting from skeptical to something that might have been respect. More questions came in rapid fire about timelines and accountability and shareholder response. Elena fielded them with practiced skill, never defensive, never making excuses, just owning the failures and articulating the path forward with a clarity that felt almost defiant. When it ended 40 minutes later, the general consensus seemed split. Half the room looked sympathetic to their transparency. The other half looked like sharks that had just tasted blood in the water. Daniel had no idea which reaction would win out in the next news cycle. But at least they had told the truth. At least they had tried to do the right thing even when it would have been easier to hide. Backstage, Elena collapsed into a chair like someone had cut the strings holding her upright. "I might have just destroyed my company." Daniel sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched in a way that felt both deliberate and accidental. "Or saved it." "Stock's going to tank tomorrow." "Probably. But you did the right thing." "The right thing might cost me everything." Daniel thought about his daughter asking if Elena was going to be her new mom, about coffee shop drawings and butterfly wishes, and all the fragile hope he had been trying not to build on foundations that felt increasingly unstable with each passing crisis. Then we'll figure it out together.
Elena looked at him, and something passed between them that felt bigger than partnership, bigger than professional respect, something neither of them was ready to name but could not deny anymore. Together. Her phone rang, shattering the moment. The board chairwoman. Elena's expression went carefully neutral as she answered, but Daniel saw fear flash across her features before the corporate mask slammed into place. She walked away to take the call, and Daniel sat alone in an empty backstage room, wondering if he had just watched a woman commit career suicide in the name of honesty. Wondering what happened next when the right choice destroyed everything you had built. 2 days after the press conference, Daniel walked into Apex Technologies to find the lobby transformed into a fortress under siege. Security had tripled. Metal barriers formed corridors directing employees away from the main entrance, where protesters still gathered, their signs now professionally printed instead of hastily scrawled. The media presence had grown rather than diminished, cameras tracking every person entering or leaving like the building itself was on trial. The stock had opened down 21% that morning. Daniel had checked the ticker obsessively during his commute, watching numbers that represented people's retirement accounts bleed value because Elena had chosen honesty over self-preservation. The business news channels played clips of the press conference on loop, analysts dissecting every word for signs of weakness, predicting either corporate transformation or total collapse, depending on which expert was speaking. His phone buzzed with a message from Elena's assistant before he reached the elevator. Emergency board meeting in 30 minutes. Ms. Morrison requests your presence. Daniel had never attended a board meeting, did not know the protocols or politics, but he rode the elevator to the executive floor, feeling like he was ascending to his own execution. The anteroom outside the board conference room held Elena and her legal team in urgent conversation. Patricia looked like she had aged 5 years in 2 days, her face drawn with exhaustion and stress. Elena broke away when she saw Daniel, guiding him to a quiet corner with a hand on his elbow. Thomas Whitmore is calling for a vote of no confidence. He's been working the other board members since the press conference, building support to remove me as CEO. Her voice stayed level, but Daniel heard the fear underneath. This was not just about losing a position. Apex Technologies was Elena's identity, her purpose, the thing she had sacrificed everything else to build. Without it, she would be untethered in a way Daniel understood too well from the 3 years after Sarah died. What do you need from me? Honestly, I don't know. Whitmore wants you gone too. Says you're a liability. That having an affected employee this close to the reform process creates legal exposure and conflicts of interest. He's probably right. Daniel's jaw tightened, anger replacing fear. I don't work for Whitmore. I work for you. Not if he gets his way. If they vote me out, the new CEO will clean house. You'll be first to go. The boardroom was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seattle's skyline, a conference table that could seat 20, leather chairs that probably cost more than Daniel's truck. 6 board members already seated, their expressions ranging from sympathetic to hostile, with nothing in between. Thomas Whitmore took his position at the head of the table, a man in his late 60s with the bearing of someone who had made hard decisions for decades without losing sleep. This emergency session addresses the fallout from Miss Morrison's press conference. In 48 hours since she publicly admitted to systemic failures, we've lost over $350 million in market capitalization. Shareholders are threatening lawsuits. Our largest clients are requesting meetings to discuss whether Apex can be trusted. Our reputation, built over 9 years, has been damaged, possibly beyond repair.
He turned to Elena with the expression of a disappointed father confronting a wayward child. "Ms. Morrison, what were you thinking?" Elena stood, refusing to remain seated while being attacked. "I was thinking we owed our employees the truth, that hiding behind lawyers and PR spin would make us complicit in covering up systematic abuse, that sometimes doing the right thing costs money." Everything costs money. The question is whether the cost is justified. You chose public confession over damage control, and now we're all paying the price. Catherine Brennan, the former Microsoft HR executive, Daniel recognized from his research on the board, leaned forward with an expression of someone trying to be reasonable in an unreasonable situation. "Ms. Morrison, we understand the moral impulse, but you have a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. Your actions have directly harmed their interests. My actions exposed crimes committed under my watch. Should I have hidden that to protect stock prices?" Whitmore slammed his palm on the table, the sound cracking through the room. "You should have handled it quietly, settled with the affected employees under NDAs, fired Holloway without fanfare, implemented reforms without admitting culpability. That's how adults manage corporate crisis, not by broadcasting our failures to every media outlet in the country." The room erupted into overlapping arguments, board members choosing sides, lawyers trying to restore order while protecting their client. Daniel sat frozen, watching Elena's life's work get torn apart by people who measured success in quarterly earnings instead of human cost. Whitmore raised his hand, and silence fell with military precision. "I'm calling for a vote of no confidence in CEO Elena Morrison. Given the catastrophic damage her decisions have caused, I move that she be removed from her position, effective immediately." Elena went pale, but kept her spine straight, her voice steady, despite the tremor Daniel could see in her hands. "I'd like the opportunity to present my case before any vote." "You've presented enough already, to the entire world. Then let me present to the people who actually matter. The board that's supposed to govern this company with more wisdom than I apparently possess." The sarcasm was subtle, but cutting. Daniel saw several board members react, approval or disapproval flickering across their faces, too quick to categorize definitively. Whitmore considered, then gestured with false magnanimity. "You have 15 minutes. Make them count." Elena pulled up her presentation, data she had compiled over sleepless nights while the world outside screamed for her resignation. She clicked to the first slide, and her voice shifted into the tone that had probably sold investors on Apex Technologies 9 years ago. Elena pulled up her presentation, data she had compiled over sleepless nights while the world outside screamed for her resignation. She clicked to the first slide, and her voice shifted into the tone that had probably sold investors on Apex Technologies 9 years ago. Confident, visionary, unshakable. "When I founded Apex Technologies, I was 24 with $50,000 and a belief that I could build a company where people mattered. For the first 5 years, we lived those values. Then we scaled, brought on investors who cared about growth rates. Somewhere in that process, I stopped seeing the human beings making my success possible." She advanced to the next slide, showing the audit findings. 6 weeks ago, I discovered we'd become exactly what I swore we'd never be. I had a choice. Handle it quietly, as Mr. Whitmore suggests, or face it publicly and prove we could change. Whitmore interrupted with barely contained irritation. "And look where that's gotten us." Elena advanced to the next slide, showing data Daniel had helped compile. "I chose transparency. Yes, we've lost market value. But look at these numbers. Employee retention up 28%. Applications increased 370%. Glassdoor rating from 3.1 to 4.8 in 2 weeks. Another slide appeared showing customer metrics. Our clients aren't fleeing. They're leaning in. Because in an industry full of companies that hide failures, we became the one willing to own ours and fix them. That's not weakness, that's competitive advantage. Daniel watched board members actually paying attention now. Elena was making a case based on business fundamentals, showing transparency could be profitable. The stock will recover. What won't recover is our integrity. If we prove honesty gets punished. She looked directly at Whitmore. You want to remove me? But first ask yourself what message that sends to every CEO watching to see if courage gets rewarded or destroyed. Whitmore leaned back, steepling his fingers. What about the whispers you're romantically involved with an employee you promoted? The appearance of favoritism? Daniel felt every eye turn to him. Elena's voice went ice cold. Mr. Carter is here because of his expertise. He knows this company better than anyone in this room. His insights shaped every reform we're implementing. Catherine Brennan, silent until now, spoke for the first time. Mr. Whitmore, I've been on this board 6 years. I've watched us prioritize profit over people repeatedly. Victoria Hayes just made me ashamed of that silence. Whitmore's expression showed betrayal. Catherine, we've discussed this. You discussed it. I listened. Now I'm speaking. Ms. Morrison chose values over value. She proved admitting failure builds trust. And you want to fire her for that? Catherine stood with authority. If we vote Victoria out, we prove everything the protesters are saying. I move we retain Elena Morrison as CEO and give her 12 months to prove her reforms work. Whitmore looked genuinely surprised. That's not the motion on the table. Then I'm putting it there. All in favor? 3 hands rose with Catherine. 3 rose in opposition with Whitmore. Everyone turned to David Anderson, the younger board member who had been silent. David, you have the deciding vote. David looked at Elena, then Daniel, then back. I came to this board because Apex represented something different. Maybe Ms. Morrison can help us find it again. His hand went up. 4-3. Elena kept her position. Whitmore's face reddened, but he nodded curtly. The motion passes. Ms. Morrison remains CEO subject to 12-month review. This meeting is adjourned. Catherine paused beside Elena afterward. Don't waste this chance. Prove we were right. She turned to Daniel. Mr. Carter, walk with me. In the hallway, Catherine studied him. You're wasted here. As long as you work for Apex, people will question if your success is merit or favoritism. She handed him a business card. I run a tech company. We need a director of operations. Same salary plus equity. Completely separate from Apex. No conflicts. Think about it. Call me if interested. We can start you in 2 weeks. When the room emptied, Elena collapsed into her chair. Daniel moved to her side, his hand finding her shoulder. You did it. By 1 vote. But you won. Elena looked up and her expression cracked open. I couldn't have done this without you. Daniel pulled her to her feet. They stood close enough that the space between them felt charged. I trust you completely. Elena's hand came to rest against his chest. Daniel, I need to tell you. Her phone rang. Catherine's name. The moment shattered. Elena stepped back and answered. After a brief conversation, she hung up. Catherine offered you director of operations at her company. Same salary I'm offering, plus equity. Completely separate, so no conflict of interest. Daniel pulled the card from his pocket. She already told me. Elena moved to the windows. You should take it. Is that what you want? I want you to have options. And if what's best for us includes me, then we do it right. We wait. You build your career somewhere no one can question, and when enough time has passed, we revisit what this is. How long? However long it takes to do this properly. Daniel understood she was right, even though he hated it.
What if you meet someone else? Elena's laugh came out broken.
I haven't met anyone who made me feel anything in 8 years. I'm worried about losing you before we even start.
You won't lose me. I'll take Catherine's offer, and we'll wait.
That's very mature and reasonable.
I hate every word of it.
Me too.
Daniel left before he could change his mind. In his truck, he called Catherine. I'm accepting. When do you want me to start?
2 weeks.
3 months later, Daniel worked at Catherine's company with reasonable hours and real success. Apex had stabilized. Elena texted daily with professional messages that said more than their words. Lily asked constantly about Elena. On a rainy Saturday, Daniel made a decision and texted Elena. Lily keeps asking about you. Would you want to come to dinner? Nothing romantic, just, we miss you.
I'd love to. When?
Tonight, 6 p.m. Elena arrived with flowers for Lily and wine for Daniel. Dinner was chaotic and perfect. After Lily went to bed, they sat on the couch with careful space between them.
I've been thinking about us, Elena said.
It's been almost 4 months. Are you keeping track? Down to the day.
Lily asked if you were going to be part of our family.
Daniel reached for Elena's hand, the first intentional touch in months. I told her I hope so.
I've never been good at relationships.
Neither have I. Not since Sarah died.
We're a disaster waiting to happen.
So what do? Daniel pulled her closer. We try anyway. We take it slow. We protect Lily. And we trust we're both brave enough to risk it.
I'm all in. Scared, but all in.
The kiss started gentle, then became something more, something that tasted like hope and months of wanting. 18 months after the press conference, Daniel watched Elena present at a tech conference in San Francisco about corporate reform. Today, Apex is ranked number 2 for workplace culture. Revenue up 42%. Because we proved doing the right thing builds trust. After the panel, Daniel met her backstage. They walked through fog-covered streets until he pulled her into an alcove and knelt. 18 months ago, you turned my life upside down. You made me believe I was worth more than I thought. He opened a box with a simple platinum ring. Elena Morrison, will you marry me? Elena sank to her knees, tears streaming. When I stood in your kitchen, I was trying to fix my biggest mistake. I didn't know I'd find my greatest success. Yes, every day. Yes. They told Lily together that weekend. She saw the ring immediately.
You're getting married.
Elena knelt to her level.
I can't replace your mom, but I'd like to be your other mom if that's okay. Can I have 2 moms? One in heaven and one here?
Yes. Your mom will always be your mom. Lily nodded seriously.
Okay then.
Yes. 2 years after the press conference, Daniel stood at a small chapel watching Lily walk down the aisle in lavender carrying sunflowers. Elena appeared in a simple white dress, walking alone because she had built herself. They exchanged vows about drowning and being saved, about empires and remembering why they mattered. That evening in their Ballard house, Daniel found Elena watching Lily sleep. She asked if I thought her mom would be happy about us.
What did you tell her?
That her mom would be grateful Lily has another person to love her. That love multiplies. Elena touched his face.
Real love isn't perfect. It's choosing someone every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Outside, Seattle's rain tapped against windows. Inside, warmth and safety and 3 hearts beating in sync. They had built this from honesty and courage and the belief that broken people could create something whole, not perfect, but real.